Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming today. Today's session is going to be about a 30-minute introduction to mindfulness meditation. I invite you all to just reflect on what your intention was to come today and what your intention may be around mindfulness meditation, whether it's a curiosity or something you've heard about it. And maybe just reflect on that internally for a moment or while we're going through this. I'll start off by introducing myself and then go over what we're going to do today. I'm Bill Kahn. I've been a regular meditator for about the last 7 years. I started in 2012 really seriously taking classes at UCLA, and then I've just kind of grown my practice over the years. And right now I'm in a program at UCLA to become a certified meditation teacher. And what we're doing today is really part of my training and preparation for doing that on a regular basis. I do plan to offer regular walk-in meditations here at the library in Valley Center, probably starting really pretty soon in the next couple of weeks. And I'll put information about that up on the library calendar and make some postings. So if anyone's interested in follow-up, then that'll be available. So for about the first third of today's session, I'll just go over some ideas about what mindfulness is, what mindfulness meditation is like, and try to discuss some of the misunderstandings and myths that may exist around it. And then in the middle part, we'll do a meditation together. And I'll give a little bit of guidance during that meditation. And then in about the last third of today's session, I'll open up for questions. Anything that might have come up during the session, anything that you might have brought with you as a question about mindfulness that I didn't cover or didn't answer. And that's there are many things around this, so it's likely I won't cover all of them for you. So what is mindfulness? From my perspective, there are a few different ways to define it, but I think of mindfulness as paying attention to present moment experience on purpose and without trying to change anything. And the kind of attention that we want to bring to the present moment is a bare attention, an attention to bodily sensations that may be internal or may come in from the external environment, that may be a part of our internal thought process. So that's really in a nutshell a definition of mindfulness. Everyone has experienced mindfulness. I think we probably are mindful at least a few times a day in our normal activities. Often when we're in nature, we may pause to look at a fern or a moss or a tree or something and really be absorbed in that moment. If we're focusing on something in our work life or our student life, like a math problem or any number of things, in the flow of an athletic event, where our mind is completely absorbed in the moment, those are moments of mindfulness. Why would we do mindfulness? Why would we practice mindfulness? I'll say from my personal experience, I really was curious about mindfulness as a young person, but as I got older, I heard about benefits that could come from mindfulness, such as stress management, improved immune system performance in our bodies, reduced inflammation in our bodies. I also heard that one could deal better with events that happen unexpectedly. So perhaps reduce our reactivity and build some space around events that happen. So that instead of reacting perhaps to certain things that come up, like maybe an unskillful move by a driver on the freeway, instead of having an instantaneous reaction of anger, we might have a little bit of space in which to notice maybe more accurately what happened, and have a little bit of space to discern what a skillful response might be. It might be no response. It might be a maneuver which we can make, or to slow down. So that these are some of the benefits, and there's science around mindfulness. There's research that shows some of the benefits that I've discussed and others. There was a fairly in-depth study of about 107 chronically depressed, treatment-resistant patients who were shown to benefit fairly significantly from adding mindfulness-based cognitive therapy to their normal psychiatric and medical care, and other studies. And I invite you to check out a book called Altered Traits, and in the handout that will be available to you today, there's a link, to that book, or at least the author and the title. Altered Traits by Richard Davidson and Daniel Goleman is a great book to look at, to give you a sense of what is known about the benefits of this practice and what the limitations are. Mindfulness is very popular in our contemporary culture. Now there's a lot in the news and in health magazines and the like about what mindfulness can do for you. And some of it should be taken with some skepticism. I've seen articles that say mindfulness can reduce belly fat. Hasn't had that effect on me. And any number of things. So I just invite you to have some skepticism about it. And that book is a great place, because these two people know about as much as anybody does about mindfulness and the research around it. And they show you what's known, and they also give you a healthy dose of the limitations and how some of the studies really don't have enough of a longitudinal aspect, or just aren't conclusive enough to tell you that this or that is a consequence. How do you meditate? The first thing that I learned about meditation was that to meditate, you remove all thoughts from your mind. And I tried that very sincerely, and I utterly failed. And I felt like I was just incapable of meditating. I mean, it really stopped me, and that was about 40 years ago. And only once I got engaged with taking an actual class through UCLA about mindfulness meditation did I learn that that's not the case at all. We all have the capacity to do this. So I wanted to dispel that myth. A misperception I had as well was that you need to sit in the lotus position, and if I really couldn't get my feet up on my thighs, I just wasn't going to be able to do this. And that's another big misconception. We can meditate standing. In fact, when we do the meditation today, I'll probably just stand here. I found that it's actually quite enjoyable to meditate standing sometimes. Walking, you can do meditation walking. That can really be engaging. It can be a great way to meditate. You can meditate sitting in chairs like you're doing now, lying down. The mindfulness-based stress reduction program does body scan meditations lying down on a yoga mat, and that's a great way to do body scans. Because your body is just sort of laid out in a linear way, and it's easy to trace, through your interoception, where you're in meditation. But you can also do that sitting or in any other position. So, really rigid positions and things like that are not necessary. It's not necessary to have a mantra. It's not necessary to have a sacred object to focus on, but you can do that. And many forms of meditation use objects like that, and that's perfectly fine. The type of meditation that I practice mainly is called Vipassana, which means insight meditation. And in Vipassana, we focus on sensations. We do take a lot of time looking at our inner life, but we also focus on things outside, sounds, things in our visual field, smells, tastes, all sorts of things. So now that we've done kind of an introduction, just a high-level introduction, we'll transition into a meditation for a little bit. So if you brought a cushion or some other object that you want to use to assist you in meditation, go ahead at this time and use that, or feel free to sit where you are. I recommend you put your feet on the floor if that's comfortable. It looks like we can all reach the floor. Sometimes the chairs are too high. I'm comfortable.
A little short.
Just needed.
Okay, so I invite you to just feel yourself sitting. Just feel what it feels like to be sitting in a chair right now in this moment. You might feel the touch of your thighs on the chair, or your back against the back of the chair. You can meditate with your eyes closed or with your eyes open if that's more comfortable for you. If you meditate with your eyes open, I invite you to just place your gaze downward just a little bit, so your chin is just a little bit down. But be in a comfortable position. None of these postures need to be exaggerated. Just feel yourself sitting. And as you're sitting here, just see if you can notice yourself breathing. Just see if you can notice your breath coming in and out. And as you do that, I invite you to notice the location in your body where the physical felt sensation of your breath is the most noticeable. Maybe in your abdomen, maybe in your chest, your back, might be in your nostrils. But wherever it is, and it can be different for different people, I invite you to bring your attention to that place in your body where you feel the bare sensation of your breath. Just hold your attention in a curious way. It's a curiosity. This doesn't need to be an intense thing, but I invite you to bring a real focused attention to it. Just feel the breath coming in and going out. And notice the space between the in and the out breath, beginning of the in breath, the end of the in breath, the beginning of the out breath. And if you can, notice if the breath is smooth, or if it's maybe a little rough, if it's even. Whatever you notice, just bring a curious attention to it. If you notice at some point that your attention has moved away from your focus on the breath, as soon as you notice that, just gently but with intention, bring your attention back to focusing on the sensations of the breath. And if this happens over and over again, that's perfectly okay. Just keep bringing your attention back each time you notice that it's moved away. Each of these instances of noticing your attention is moved and then bringing it back is a repetition of mindfulness. So I'll leave you for a few minutes to just do this in silence. notice a sensation that's so strong that it's urgently drawing your attention, I invite you to go ahead and move your attention to that more intense sensation. And bring the same curious attention to that sensation that we've been applying to the breath. And really feel exactly where in the body that sensation is. And feel the bare sensation of what the nature of that sensation is. Is it itching? Is it burning? Is it pressure? Whatever it might be. And then notice whether the sensation is changing over time. Is it becoming more intense? Is it diminishing in intensity? Is it pulsing? Or is it just a curious attention, just to the felt sensation? And then, when you're ready, bring your attention back to the object of your focus, on which our case today is our breath. Come to the end of this meditation, I invite you to just slowly open your eyes, or if your eyes are open, slowly re-engage your attention now with your whole body and then with the whole space around you, this whole room, light coming in through the windows.
Relaxing.
Does anybody want to share anything from it? It's not required, but I invite you, even if you don't speak about it, just reflect for a moment on what that was like for you. Just checking the time here. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it was interesting when you, well, because you can hear everything that's going around you. So I would hear a sound, and I would, think about that sound, and then I would bring myself back to my breathing. So I would hear sound over there and bring it back. I found myself doing that a lot, but then it seemed to slow down as we were, spending more time concentrating on the breathing. At first, it was like, oh, I hear this, I hear that. Okay, right back down.
That's great.
I found kind of hard to do that, though. It's hard to train your mind to come back to your breathing when you're like, then you think about that thing and your mind starts going everywhere else. So it's, I think that just over time will take time to train your mind to come back to your breathing.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful to know, and I can tell you this from my own experience and the experience of people who have 40 years of experience meditating, that happens to everyone. That happens to the Dalai Lama, it happens to everybody who meditates. Not every session is the same, and some can be very turbulent. If your life is turbulent at that moment for any reason, your health is dying, just going through some rapid change or whatever, some of our meditation sits can be very calming and just a deep and amazing experience. And some of them can be fraught with intense emotions, or nervous mind. Every once in a while I'll sit and my mind will be very, monkey mind is really the word that's, kind of a metaphor for this, where the monkey jumps from tree to tree to tree. Our mind's attention wants to jump from thing to thing to thing. And it's really evolved to do that. Our mind seems to be evolved to think its own thoughts and to make relationships between things. And so a thought comes up and then that relates to something else. So indeed, with practice, it definitely does get better, though. And your sense of self-confidence gets better. That's a real fun moment when you start to feel like, yeah, I have this.
I think when you feel like you're losing the control and then your ability to give it back, you feel like, okay, you're like baby steps walking. It's better. We went through a technique that the Navy SEALs do. It's called the triangular breath, where you breathe in 4, hold 4, breathe out 4. And you do that in intense, and you're bringing it into an athletic form now, prior to big events or whatever you're training for, to take that, your mind and your breath, and put it together and control it. And that's when I hear something like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, then you kind of bring it back into the center.
That's right. That's right. I don't teach anything like that.
That one, it's a triangle or a square where you would sit there and you do it at your desk and you take in, breathe 4 seconds in, hold 4, exhale 4.
Do it like a square.
Yeah, you can do a square or a triangle or whatever. And what it does is it just, in a situation of disaster, or conflict, or or stressfulness, sometimes you got to take yourself out of the situation, and you do that for 3 times, they say.
Yeah, and you can do something like that anytime during the day. And research has shown that practicing breathing techniques that elongate your out-breath process are calming.
Well, they say we don't breathe. We shallow breathe all day long because of our society, the stress, life, the rapidness of the world, that we don't breathe, and it does affect our organs.
Our health. Yeah.
Have you noticed, because I feel like not all days, but yeah, like I related to the driving thing that you said. I'm like, I don't consider myself to have road rage, but there's just days where it's not even discharged, but it just seems like every little thing that'll happen, and your temper is so short, and you're just so easily annoyed, and whatever it may be. So you have found that if you do your meditation in the morning, that you're able to handle those stressors or whatever you want to call them a little bit better.
Well, yeah, and I can only speak for myself, but for me in my practice, and I noticed this when I was in the middle of a course called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, an 8-week course I took at UCSD, that is to me, a gold standard kind of a meditation class. I noticed sometime along that 8-week span a really noticeable change in what my experiences was like driving. And now I've had years of driving where I have a completely, and I've been in 2 car accidents during that time where I've been hit by other drivers, and one of them was really scary. Cindy was with me. And I noticed that it didn't trigger anger at the other drivers. So it can be very, very helpful for that. And one of the things that's mysterious about this practice is it's not obvious it wasn't obvious to me what I was doing in meditation that caused this to happen. Because when I sit, and I recommend that you do the same, and when we meditate, when we do a sit or whatever we call it, walking meditation, whatever it might be, we're not going into it to change anything. We're just really paying a special kind of attention. But that special kind of attention we pay seems to change the way that our neural pathways are favored, I would say, when we're going through our daily life. And Christy kind of pointed out that our life triggers us in ways that keep us in kind of a fight or flight state. Maybe not a full-on fight or flight like if a lion was just coming, but keep us chronically activating our sympathetic nervous system in a way that makes our digestive system not work as well as it might, our immune system, all kinds of things like this.
They were saying T&J because people go through their day like this, and they carry it in their jaw, and they carry it in their neck, and any weakness, like if you've ever had an injury, it seems like your back hurts or whatever hurts, and we hold, and we don't breathe and release positive endorsements. By the end of the day, you're like loose. And I notice that right here in my jaws by the time I get home from work sometimes. I'm like, oh,
You bring up a great point, and that is that mindfulness meditation includes things like what we just did, and longer sits, and retreats where you go to a silent meditation environment for a week or a month or 3 months or some long period of time. But it also includes moments throughout your day, and I invite you today and just try to remind yourself to just take a moment here and there. When you walk to your car, maybe be mindful of the sensation in the bottom of your feet. That just brings you into the moment. And it tends to break the cycle of maybe worrying about what the next thing is, or worrying about what happened yesterday, or what the driver did down on Old Castle Road, or whatever it might be. And that is a thing that you can do that just doses you with this. And what I found through this practice also is that it gives you agency. And that's a good feeling, right? It's like a feeling that you have some control and that you can manage whatever comes up.
So do you suggest starting your day off, and as your day progresses, try to meditate throughout situations that occur? Or is there a time? How many?
That's a great question. I definitely invite you to try, you just find gaps here and there. But as far as the meditation, meditating daily is a good thing to do, and not judging yourself around meditation. Either during your meditation sit, I call them sits, whether you really sit or not. But also don't judge yourself if you miss a day or 2 or 5 or whatever. Just go back to it. But what was really helpful for me was tying meditating to my morning routine before I went to work. I'm a type of person that when I wake up, I'm really alert in the morning. And then I get kind of drowsy at night, and I have a harder time in the later evening really holding my attention on something. So I thought morning is good for me, but we're all different. And so I took this routine where shower, shave, brush my teeth, start to get dressed. And just before I put my pants or my jacket or shirt on, I would just go sit on my cushion and meditating before I went to work. And I found that really helped me get into a rhythm. I also got a meditation timer app for my phone. Things like that aren't really necessary, but they can be helpful because it has a little bell that will ring when you start and when you finish. And then as I got more sophisticated with my meditations, some of them might be long. One of my meditations is about 70 minutes long, and it's broken into 10-minute parts where I'm doing different things. I may start with my breath and then go to interoception of like the sensations inside my body and on and on. Well, at the end of each segment, a little bell rings. So I just know to move. And so I don't really have to feel like I have to pay attention to time. Like when I've been talking here, I keep glancing at my phone to see how many minutes have gone by so I can manage this. I probably could have done it with bells. So that's helpful. So really having a regular time each day that suits you, and you experiment with it. And it doesn't mean you have to do it at that time every day, but that seems to help us establish habits. And making this a habit is good. And then knowing that even if you don't let perfect get in the way of better is something that I kind of relate to or try to embody. And don't fall into a trap that I fell into pretty early on. I was like, I just can't meditate for 45 minutes. I just don't have time, or it's just too done. Meditate for 3 minutes. Just allow yourself that. It's much better to get a daily meditation that's fairly short. You just bring yourself to bring your attention to something and just go with it.
So you would just recommend for like beginners, let's say in my morning to start the meditation. I just want to make sure I'm doing it right.
Well, before I answer your question,
really focus my breath.
I want to stop you right there.
Yeah.
That's another thing that we get really hung up on, doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
One of the key things when we're meditating, I may have mentioned when I introduced what it is that we want to pay careful attention to our present moment experience without needing to change anything, without judging the experience, and not judging ourselves. So you'll catch yourself judging yourself for not meditating well or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so don't judge yourself for judging yourself either. This is one of the different things about this practice. Is a really important part of it is being kind to yourself. Kind to just whatever, accepting present moment experience just as it is, and accepting yourself just as you are, an imperfect meditator. And it is wise to try to do it maybe right. There are some pitfalls in meditation that can be harmful. You can get hung up in going through the jhanas. The jhanas are like a deep form of concentration meditation. And some monks have gone off into deep levels of consciousness and concentration, which can be done. But that can be a trap because you really don't develop insight by doing that. You just become really amazing at sitting for hours and hours and going into a deep state of concentration. And that will change your brain and will change the way that you operate, but it's a trap. It's a meditation trap. So there are things that you would want to avoid as you go along and your practice develops. I've got some resources that I'll share with you, and you'll have this to take home with you. Books, that I found useful. One of them is called Mindfulness in Plain English, and it's kind of like what it says it is. If you don't find that book particularly helpful, I found it very helpful, but I've met people who didn't like the book. I think they felt the author was too much of a monk or guru type or something. But I found that it's very practical. It deals with these kinds of questions about how do I do it right. It's excellent for that. Another really excellent book that I read for the first time about 7 years ago when I read that book was Joseph Goldstein's book. I just want to get the title right. Mindfulness, A Practical Guide to Awakening by Joseph Goldstein. That's a great one. Joseph Goldstein's a great meditation teacher. I've seen him speak up in Santa Monica, and he's located back in Massachusetts. But he founded the Insight Meditation Center in Barre, Massachusetts back in like 1974, I think. And when he teaches something like this, he has some hilarious and really useful stories to tell about his development and things that he went through.
Do people meditate? Is music positive or negative?
There's so many good questions. I think that's up to you. I don't usually, but that doesn't mean that it isn't a great thing. I have some music that is designed to be good for meditation. If you're interested, I can point you towards some of those recordings. So I do have some of that stuff, but I find that, and there are lots of guided meditations. I haven't really given you any links here to guided meditations, and I put my email address in here, so if you have questions or would like me to give you more information, I'd be happy to do that. Guided meditations, like I guided a short meditation here, there are a number of guided meditations that are available on the internet, and those can be useful. They really help you it helps train you. And at some point what I found was that my meditation would be deeper if I didn't use them, but they're really helpful for a while to get you kind of used to it and give you some guidance and that kind of thing. So I'd be happy to give you some links to where you can get some of that stuff as well. Did I answer your question?
Mhm.
If you're on.
Well, you pretty much there's no wrong and there's a lot of rights. It's everybody's different, and whatever gets you to a mindful place is what works for you.
Yeah, it isn't a rigid thing. There,
And I
it
think
definitely,
people think that it's so,
it's definitely very beneficial to interact with somebody who really knows how to do it, and to answer the questions that come up. But the practice really is something that becomes your own, and you customize it. There's some phrases. There's something called loving kindness meditation and equanimity meditation that I didn't get into today that involve phrases. And there are phrases in books and training for everyone. What I've found with all these kinds of things is it helped me to make my own phrases that really resonated with me. And I would invite you to do that. So bring your own creativity and curiosity to the process of meditation. I think I covered everything. Any other questions? I know what time it is.
It's 20 to 11.
Oh, okay. So really, we have the room until 11. And you have my services. And I'm happy to answer any questions. We could do a walking meditation if anybody wants to do that outside, or anything that you use. Or you're welcome to go.
When I was just to reflect on the guided meditation, I did notice that my breath was super short at the beginning, and it's something that I'm working on just to be in better shape. And I think stress is whatever. My breath was short, but very quickly it just relaxed and got really deep and really nice. And then what I really appreciated about that, because it was unclear at first, kind of the overall thought, was when you invited us to focus on something else that might be nagging at you, and literally had a pain in the neck. So that was one. But you mentioned emotions at that point, and I think for me that might be a really beneficial side, because it seems that the original thought pattern to help get you into the state is more physical based, about concentrating on senses and physical senses, not necessarily auditory, sight, but Chris kind of clarified that too. But the emotional side of that too, where it has nothing to do with my physical senses, maybe. But
It actually does.
But the emotional side, also is influenced by many other things that it's hard to describe. But those, for me, are what would bother me more than anything. Although I tend to ignore a lot of the physical side. Just ignore my headaches, ignore my pain in the neck, ignore all that, because I can get through it and whatever. So, like you said, it gets tight and focus on those injuries or whatever. So, just thought I'd comment on that. I appreciated the invitation to concentrate on maybe an emotional thought during that time.
Okay, that brings up some good things. Thanks for bringing that up, because there's like all kinds of super important stuff that we can unpack around what you just said. And I'll try to keep them all in mind. The first thing is the physical. When we're paying attention to our physical sensations, emotions manifest themselves as physical sensations in our bodies, and we can bring curiosity to that. And it probably doesn't take that long for any of us to just kind of run into a situation where something like that is sort of flaring up, or we're really feeling something intense. And I would invite you, and for me, for whatever reason, those things don't seem to come up for me much in meditation, but they do in life. It's great then to just bring the kind of attention that we brought to the breath, and just sense into our body where we're feeling the emotion. Emotions really, at least just in my experience, don't really happen in the absence of some kind of physical sensation. It could be in the abdomen, fear, sometimes in the neck, in the face, in the head. And what happened for me is as I meditated more and more regularly, and especially doing body scan meditations, I just started noticing these things more and more. And you bring curiosity to that, and it can be really fascinating. Headaches, physical aches and pains, as well as emotional disturbances. And then what you can notice often is that an emotion will manifest itself as some kind of a tightness or a feeling. Like I'll notice incipient stress as a slight curling of the muscles in my left foot. Between the ball of my foot and my toes, I'll just start doing that a little bit. And if they're doing that just a little bit and I bring my attention to it, they release. But I notice that that's like the bird, the canary in the coal mine a little bit. It's a very sensitive indicator for me. There's some kind of stress. Don't know what it is. And it's not an indicator of like a huge one. But there are all kinds of these little indicators that we can become familiar with through this practice of sensing. Another thing I want to touch on with emotions is that sometimes when we bring this attention inward, an intense emotion can come up. Most of us in our lives at some point or another have experienced trauma. And for some, the trauma has not really been processed, so it comes back and back. And particularly in those cases, we can sometimes have a feeling like we're re-experiencing some terrible thing that's happened to us before. And if that happens to you during meditation, that might be a time where you don't want to continue going deep into it. People who are suffering from PTSD need to work with people who have a lot of training around how to deal with this, because part of processing the trauma is to look at it, but another part of processing the trauma is to titrate that experience in little doses and bring yourself back. So what I'm leading to is if during a meditation period, or even in life, if something so intense comes up that it's overwhelming you, I invite you to just move your attention to something in the external environment that is relatively neutral. And that's different maybe for all of us, but it might just be that strip of wood on the wall over there. You could just bring your gaze to that and just examine it with curiosity. And that can have the effect of turning down it can help break the cycle of a really deep, intense emotional experience. One other thing I'd like to say about emotions that was completely unknown to me before I started this practice is that, well, we're aware that in society there, like that person's getting emotional and that's bad. Emotions turn out to be an integral part of pretty much everything we do. And a lot of that happens in subtle ways that have evolved to help our body maintain homeostasis. So little tiny emotional operations are going all the time that really are so subtle that we don't notice them. And they're different from these big emotional things. But I think there's just a spectrum of it. So we don't need to think that it's unhealthy to have emotions. We have emotions. Anger, we get angry. It happens. So when you're meditating and anger comes up for some reason, for whatever reason, it's skillful to notice the anger, to sense into how the anger feels in your body at that moment and really pay attention to it. And what I think you'll notice is any sensation that you really pay careful attention to is dynamic. It's changing. And it's interesting to notice that. The intensity may be going up, it may be going down, but there's something about noticing the changing quality of experience, especially if it's an intense pain, that just takes away some of its power to make us suffer. So I wanted to touch on that around emotions. Malcolm Gladwell has a book called Blink that touches on, that's not in the, there are millions of books about this kind of stuff, But he's written about some, in his book Blink, about some of the ties in with emotions and how, gut feel, we have a gut feel for certain things. And those are really things that are happening below our consciousness that are really integrating past experiences and learning that can be useful to us. How are we doing on time?
10 more minutes.
Oh, we're good. Yeah, fine, good. Yeah, thanks, Jack. I mean, that's
good. Thank you.
So I'm just curious, when we went through this today, is there anything you felt like, gosh, if he had just said this or done this differently? Is there anything you think that that it's an extremely short, the 10-minute presentation up front, really short. My assignment is to do a 30-minute intro, and so I just broke it into 3 10-minute segments. But I invite you to, and if you're not comfortable sharing it verbally with me right now, because it's so critical or whatever, feel free to send me an email or whatever. And I'll be watching back my video
No, you had a
and
good,
cringing.
good pace and tone. It was helpful to kind of bring that, internal breathing in, and like you're talking is like this. So that was helpful to stay kind of quiet, even with the noises and stuff.
When we were doing the meditating, I was meditating with you, so I was sensing into my breath. I was distracted a little bit occasionally looking at the time, but thank you. I don't want to put anybody on the spot. It's not required.
Your vocal is very soothing. You have a soothing manner about your vocal. So it does, because you need to be here. We're in a place, everybody's in a different place, and it was well done.
Yeah.
Thank you. Would anybody be interested in a walking meditation? There's no requirement and no pressure, no obligation.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a different approach that's, is that pretty much everyone, or you're not up for it too? Or?
I gotta get back and start.
Oh, okay.
The guys are moving without me right now, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd be happy to help you.
Oh, no, don't worry about that. No, I can get.
He just wants to, he just needs to get back.
Well, thanks so much, Robert.
Oh, no, I'm
Now when you get stressed out moving your hand.